My name is Anne McElhinney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
Welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. It is week 37.
And where are we?
In Serbia.
It's week 30.
No, it's not. That's right. It's week 87.
That's 1 year, 8 3/4 months since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown. Remember that when the government told us it would be 2 weeks, we just had to suspend our freedoms for 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
And later in the show, by the way, we're going to be talking a lot about COVID.
Yes.
But also, don't forget, this is also the last week of our shoot of the 𝙎𝙤𝙤𝙘 movie.
And where are we?
We're in Serbia. We're in Belgrade, Serbia.
We're Belgrade, Serbia. We are the Belgrade Golf Club, and they spell club with a K here.
I love that. And by the way, you asked,
Golf Club.
And some of you guys asked for a recipe, and we have a recipe at the end of the show. But what else do we have,
We have a Serbian recipe.
What else do we have?
Well, you know, we have a very interesting show today. We're going to talk obviously about the COVID madness continues, from vaccine mandates to for 5-year-olds to being declared a COVID death if you had 3 bullets in you or if you fell off a ladder, because we have to scare you. And please, don't believe the liberal media, and don't even believe the conservative media. The indictment of Steve Bannon is all about the attack on a free press. It has nothing to do with contempt of Congress, which in my opinion should be encouraged by all citizens. It is an attack on journalism, no ifs and no buts, and I will give you that full analysis, and I think I'm perfectly positioned to bring you that analysis, which seems to have passed by every other news outlet.
Yes.
And talking of attacks on journalism, Anne?
And talking of attacks on journalism, we bring you what you need to know about the FBI raid on the home of journalist James O'Keefe and why it's a very, very, very bad portent for the future.
When I wrote that, I thought, is the word portent a real word?
Moving on.
Is it? No way you write a word, portent. It's a portent.
It portends, or portent. Portends. Yeah, with a T or D. Keep on.
Just to let you know, that noise you're hearing in the background is filming. We're actually filming.
We're on the set.
And there's a set. I've been criticised by certain people close to the director.
Oh.
Sources close to the director.
Sources close to the director.
Now, the director is Mr. Robert Davi. Sources close to the director have implied that we were giving away too much about the movie through our podcast.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Keep them keen. So there is a scene being shot over there at the Belgrade Golf Club. But we're not telling you about it.
Let's talk about, and also, by the way, later in the show, we're going to talk about crazy California. Can it get any crazier? And the answer is yes, it can. Wait till you hear about the latest madness coming out of West Hollywood.
And I want to tell you about a little incident offset here on 𝙎𝙤𝙤𝙘, which
happened over the weekend.
And by popular demand, Anne.
By popular demand, we have a recipe. We have
from Serbia.
From Serbia, because people were writing and saying, and you know what? You write, you ask, and you know what we do? We always deliver, or at least we try to deliver.
By the way, most people here don't have an accent like a Serbian.
So that's not Phelim great accent. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't think you're going to win any mimicking of Serbian accents with that one.
Okay, so what's on the show today? We're going to start with COVID madness. New Zealand man who died of gunshot wounds to be recorded as COVID-19 death. Robert Hart, 40, was shot 3 times, and after death he was tested.
After he died, they tested him for COVID.
And now he's down in the record books as a COVID death, which is significant for New Zealand because they're trying to use COVID scare tactics.
Now, since his death, health authorities say he tested positive for COVID-19, and One News understands that several people are also isolating. So then you have to ask how someone who sustained these types of injuries and then died ends up as part of our COVID-19 death tally. Now, the Ministry of Health says that's because under the World Health Organization guidelines, anyone who dies while also having an acute COVID-19 infection is recorded as part of a nation's death tally, whatever the cause of death might be. Now, exactly how this man died will be subject to an ongoing police investigation as well as an investigation by the coroner. And meanwhile, 3 people have been charged in relation to the death, and police are still hunting for a 4th.
And I think what's interesting there is that last paragraph there, Phelim, in the story, where basically the health authorities in New Zealand are quoting the WHO and saying, we're using the WHO standard. We're using the WHO standard, which, by the way, should be a warning to everyone. And this is not the only story like this. We've seen stories like this all over the world, including a builder, 51, who died after falling from a 10-foot ladder. And that death was recorded also as a coronavirus death.
Well, I remember that guy in Northern Ireland near the start of the panicdemic.
The young man?
The young man, 18-year-old, dies of COVID in Northern Ireland.
And of course, everyone is in complete shock.
Everyone's in complete shock. And then it turns out the family recognised who they were talking about. And of course, he had chronic
The poor
heart
man.
condition.
He had an
He
awful
was
lot of
chronically
conditions.
disabled.
Yes.
He was
He
born
was obese
disabled.
and all of that.
Yes,
and he had
but
a lot of difficulties. And the family actually were really upset about the
that
fact
he was going to be labelled this coronavirus. Not
that they were
because
using him, actually, that they were kind of using him, and the poor
They just
man.
wanted him to be known as more than he was a lovely child, and they wanted him to be known more. And then you go over to Austria, where if you haven't got the vaccine, you're being forced to be locked down.
Over 2 million people in Austria will be forced into a lockdown situation because of the fact that they're not vaccinated,
Yeah.
and they're basically being imprisoned at home. But you see this stuff all over
And
the world.
Gavin Newsom, yeah.
Oh, and
extends
Gavin Newsom, but
state
also
of
this.
emergency in California for the third time. We're now 2 years. Went from 2 weeks to flatten the curve of lockdown to 2 years under a state of emergency.
But also this kind of stuff is everywhere. And by the way, we might show this little piece of footage from Brisbane, from one of the premiers, I think the premier of Brisbane in Queensland. Listen to what he had to say about the restrictions that they're going to be imposing there right now.
Life will be miserable without being vaccinated. You won't be able to get any, you won't be able to hide, you won't be able to get a doctor to sign off that you got an exclusion, because there's quite set rules on that, and doctors will be audited to see every one of their exclusions will be looked at very carefully. They'll get fined, they can get struck off. The patients who tell lies can be charged with fraud. There's a whole pile of issues, whole pile of problems if you try and get around the system. It's going to be very hard to maintain your employment if you're not vaccinated. You won't be able to go anywhere for any entertainment. So by all means, get vaccinated. You've got another week where you can get double vaccinated before the 15th to 17th of December, when it's definitely coming in, and there'll be proof that you've been vaccinated, firm proof. You'll be asked to show going into most venues. So get vaccinated, otherwise you're going to have a very, very lonely life, and you're not going to be able to maintain your employment.
What an incredible way to talk about the people. You know, you won't be able to hide, you will be miserable, you will have a very lonely life. This is authoritarianism, completely out of control. This is people thinking that there's only one thing that'll ever kill you. And it's so reductionist, and it's so anti-human, and it's anti-medicine, it's anti-science, it's anti-everything.
And of course, it's good to know that the American Medical Association is on hand to really come up with the science and focus what's important, and to really stand up for patients. Because in their latest guidebook for doctors, they said that they warn that the word vulnerable is offensive, and push Marxism as a way of getting ahead and blasting individualism. This is, when the American Medical Association, I remember I wrote to a medical friend of mine, a relative of mine, and when the American Medical Association said, that people should not be put, male or female should not be put in birth certificates, that it should be all, all should be whatever you want it to be. And I said, look, when you have the American Medical Association, no wonder there's vaccine skepticism.
Yes.
No wonder there was skepticism about COVID. When you have serious people producing nonsense like this.
Yeah. Instead of saying women, saying people who are pregnant and people who have chests.
I mean, this latest guide says, stop using words such as vulnerable, high risk, or minority, because it stigmatizes people.
But
no,
by the way,
it describes people.
Sometimes when we start the show and we talk about, how many weeks have passed, it's almost like a little joke. But you know what? It's not a joke at all. We are now in California. It's going to go past the 2-year mark, and it's going to be extended until I think it's the 31st of March. The emergency, and that's like what's that famous quote? There's nothing more permanent than a government temporary program, right?
Temporary government
and this is what Gavin Newsom is doing, and it's just horrific what he's doing, and also imposing these vaccine mandates all over California, particularly right now. I think it's very much limited to Los Angeles. We're not there for that. That's what we're going to be going home to.
Yeah.
Another reason, by the way, to move to Texas. By the way, people writing nice messages to us and saying we should come to Texas and other places where you guys live.
Austin is creeping
increasingly
up.
becoming the thing.
Talking of madness, by the way, talking of complete madness. Yeah, West Hollywood has just introduced the biggest minimum wage in the country, $17.49. That's what you have to pay.
What a great idea! Yes.
It's like, it's restaurants are having a really tough time. We closed down the restaurants for 2 years. What's your reward for opening up? You have to pay people $17.49. I mean, look, You know, talk about it. I mean, it's going to be iPads on the table now, and you're just going to order through your iPad, or you're going to order through your app, because people are used to it now. And literally, it's going to be a robot coming out to collect the dishes.
Yeah.
And one person's going to be just dealing with the whole show. So let's talk about some good news, or what should be some good news. And I realize that I know no mistake I made now, because the baby, the girl who was born, 𝙎𝙤𝙤𝙤 means. A girl. No, it's a boy.
It's a boy.
It's a boy. He had a twin sister, unfortunately, he didn't survive. He was born
19 weeks early.
19
That's
weeks
where you
early.
got it.
He was born at 21 weeks. It's a world record. And I mean, everyone
So
is
look at the photograph.
And look at the photograph.
Let's first of all look at the photograph of when the little darling was born. Look at this, look at how tiny and gorgeous this little person is. And you know, you look at that photograph and you think, there's no way, right?
Yeah.
But hang on, now look at this gorgeous guy now. Look what this guy looks like now. He is just rocking on, and he has literally just got into the Guinness Book of Records as the youngest person ever to be born premature and to rock on. And he is rocking on, and it's obviously the message. I mean, I think the message is a very strong message for pro-life people, particularly, or people who are anti-abortion, that, you know, oh yeah, you know, it's very premature. Like, this guy is rocking on. There's nothing wrong with him, by the way.
I think in some like 15, 20 states in America, you can have abortions up to 24 weeks.
Yeah.
And this 21-week-old baby
Yeah.
is rocking on. But that's the good news. So let's see how the New York Times reported that. Baby born 19 weeks early defies long odds and astonishes doctors.
Right, great. That's good.
Curtis Means, now 16 months old, reflects a troubling trend of premature births across the United States.
Troubling trend.
A troubling trend. Bear in mind that phrase, actually, a troubling trend. Please bear in mind that,
Curtis is troubling?
Yes. A problem that some research has associated with climate change.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's too mad. That's
Yeah.
almost too
And actually
mad, even for the New York Times.
Yeah. Michelle Butler was 21 weeks pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl, when she felt contractions. This is by Maria Kramer in the New York Times. As her sister drove her to hospital, Miss Butler prayed for the contractions to stop. By the way, it's very bad writing there. I corrected there. So it was Michelle Butler was 21 weeks pregnant when she felt contractions. As her sister drove her to the hospital, Mrs. Butler prayed for them to stop. That means she prayed for the sister and Miss Butler to stop. She actually was praying for the contractions to stop. Anyway, but the contractions persisted. The babies were born, a girl and a boy, each weighed under a pound and had less than 1% chance of survival. The girl, unfortunately, died a day later, but Curtis hung on. He was trying to breed, and he showed a resilience that shocked long-time nurses and doctors. He was striking even from the first breath, said Brian Sims, a neonatologist. He was just showing he was going to be a strong fellow from day one. Curtis was released in April after 275 days in the neonatal intensive care unit. Guinness Book of World Records.
Are the New York Times worried about the carbon footprint of having him survive?
Funny, you know, they actually go on and talk about, we're going to come back, we're going to talk about racism. He was 275 days in a neonatal unit. That's some racism. Mm-hmm. Yeah, anyway, the truth is, babies born that premature seldom live more than a day. The truth is, no baby has survived this age. We say less than 1% chance, but it's really closer to zero, the doctor said. Curtis's early birth reflects the persistently high frequency of premature births in the United States. So the persistently high frequency of premature births in the United States. And they also said earlier it's a troubling trend, where the yearly rate of preterm births hovers about 10%. In Alabama, the rate is 12.5% in 2019, right? So when you have the word high frequency and troubling trend, normally for the word trend you have here is normal, and here is the new trend up there. That is nowhere in this New York Times article. They just say there's a troubling trend. They just say there's a high rate. They never compare it to anywhere else, and they never tell you what the good times was that the trend is now bad. So I guess they're lying. Then they say the risk of preterm births is even higher for black women, so it's racism, right? So myriad factors contribute to premature births, including a mother's age, income, health, access to prenatal care. But climate change could also be exacerbating the problem.
Can I read this? Climate change could be exacerbating the problem, according to a 2020 study that examined more than 32 million births in the United States and found that pregnant women exposed to high temperatures or air pollution were more likely to have children who were premature, underweight, or stillborn. And by the way, can I just say on that paragraph...
That's called cities, by the way.
Yeah, first of all, it's called cities, but also the number of factors of different factors feeding into this particular groundbreaking research it's impossible to make. I can't even understand how they could possibly make that analysis. You know what I mean? How they can make that analysis, that conclusion based on those factors.
Let me help you with that, Anne.
Please
Let me
do.
help you there's a possibility here. It's too early to conclude how large a role climate change is
Oh, it
playing.
is too early, but we're going to say it anyway.
It's playing in low birth weights and preterm births. Dr. 𝙎𝙤𝙤, one of the authors of the 2020 study, said, but the evidence that it is a factor is compelling.
Oh, compelling to you.
So
Compelling
it was
to
too
you.
early to conclude a larger role, but the evidence that it's a significant factor is compelling. Those paragraphs are actually contradictory.
Correct.
He said, noting that the number of preterm births fell at least 20% in California in areas where fossil fuel plants shut down. It doesn't make any sense. Like,
Oh my
what does
God.
shutting down a fossil fuel plant have to do with climate change? Like, you know, the temperature didn't suddenly decrease in that area. It's going to get worse, Dr. 𝙎𝙤𝙤 said. Climate change is going to put increasing pressure on premature birth weights. Dr. Sims said it was not clear why Miss Butler went into early labour. Right? I mean, it's just madness.
And you know, and she had access to neonatal care,
Yeah.
so of course. But then
And
they're trying
saw
to.
Dr.
Then they're
Reiger.
also trying to tell you that there's some kind of racism going on
Yes,
too.
yes.
You can't really win, or you
Yes.
can. You know, you can't win with the New York Times because logic is something that they're not. It's not one
No,
of
they
the.
actually have, I mean, it's amazing. They have stories where they actually have contradictions in
Doesn't
one
matter,
paragraph
and
to
it-
the next.
and they don't care, and they
no
get
one
away
cared,
with it.
And they get away with it.
So tell me, Phelim, what
Steve Bannon.
happened to Steve Bannon?
Well, Steve Bannon
What
has
is
been
happening
been
to him?
indicted on contempt charges over the House's Capitol riot inquiry. So the January the 6th riot, right? So, you know, as we've said before in this programme, we have a long history with Steve Bannon.
We do.
I would consider him a friend, but doesn't mean like good Irish friends. We haven't had full-scale fights and rows. And
Wouldn't be a proper friendship without it.
proper Irish friendship without it. So you know, definitely I would consider him a friend and you know, and a very very intelligent person and
Talented.
Talented, very
Yeah,
very
very
talented. And I remember I met him with Andrew Breitbart back in the early days of Breitbart, and so I've known him a long time. And he's indicted now. He worked for Trump, obviously worked in the Trump White House, left after a year or so, and then has, you know, so let me just read the New York Times, because the New York Times does, so listen, don't believe the liberal media, don't believe the conservative media. Let me tell you now, this is about the freedom of the press, Steve Bannon's indictment, and I'm going to explain to you why. So let me explain, let me read you the New York Times, what they say. Steve Bannon has been indicted for refusing to comply with subpoenas from the House Committee investigating the January 6th attack in Congress. Mr. Bannon, 67, declined last month. The House then voted to hold Mr. Bannon in criminal contempt of Congress. Now, in my opinion, and this is a side issue, everyone should be in contempt of Congress. We employ them, we elect them. They're not our masters. This is not 15th century England. Mm-hmm. It is not Thailand where you can put in prison
For speaking ill of the king. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
These are, we actually employ them, and Congress needs to know this and remember this. Politically and legally complex case, right, was widely seen as a litmus test where the Justice Department would take an aggressive stance against one of Mr. Trump's top allies. Well, that's been answered now. They have taken it, and they've indicted him, and he could go to prison. And they talk about Mark Meadows also maybe being indicted. Mr. Bannon left the White House in 2017 and was a private citizen while backing Mr. Trump's efforts to hold on to power after Biden's victory in the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. That is a lie, right? Mm-hmm. Steve Bannon was not a private citizen. He was a private citizen, but much more importantly, he was a journalist. What they are investigating, and they mention this later, are his remarks on his podcast called The War Room, which is one of the top podcasts in America. On the planet Earth. In a report, let me read this. In a report recommending the House find Mr. Bannon in contempt, the committee repeatedly cited comments he made on his radio show on January 5th, when Mr. Bannon promised, quote, "all hell is going to break loose tomorrow." And they quoted this as evidence he had some foreknowledge about extreme events that would occur the next day. That's called working your sources, right?
Yeah, he'd heard something.
He'd heard something.
Yeah, exactly.
He was a journalist,
and he's reporting on it.
And he's reporting on it. It's called a warning too, by the way, if you were listening. But of course, because you only listen to NBC and CBS, because you don't listen. So And investigators have also pointed to a conversation Mr. Bannon had with Mr. Trump on December 30th, in which he urged him to focus his efforts on January 6th. That's called working your sources as well.
Yes.
That is a journalist. So when George Stephanopoulos left the Clinton White House and was very close to the Obama White House, he was on the phone to Obama all the time and has said this in interviews.
He had Obama as a source.
You would never dream of forcing George Stephanopoulos to appear in front of Congress or to indict him for refusing to talk about private conversations he had with President Obama or President Obama's top advisors. They're called journalistic sources, and they must be allowed to speak to journalists without fear of any kind of criminal response.
Yes.
Forget about executive privilege. This is a straightforward case of Congress should not be allowed to force someone to give up their sources. And every media organization needs to get behind this story because they're coming for you next, right? I love this. After referral from the House in Mr. Bannon's case, FBI agents in the Washington field office investigated the matter. Career prosecutors in the Public Integrity Unit of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington determined that it would be appropriate to charge Mr. Bannon with 2 counts of contempt. And a person familiar with the deliberations said they've received the full support of Attorney General Merrick B. Garland. And it's like, career prosecutors. These are the same people. This is Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. I could smell the Trump supporters
in Walmart
in this West Virginia Walmart. Vomit, vomit, vomit. Trump's not going to win, is he? No, we'll stop it. That's the career prosecutors you're dealing with. These are not sterling, straight down the line guys. These are deeply political people in the deeply political FBI and the deeply political Justice Department. Deep state, and they got the full support of Attorney General Merrick B. Garland, who is a career hack, evil piece of Attorney General who will prosecute anyone who politically disagrees with him.
That's unbelievable.
That's what you're dealing with. So this is an attack on the freedom of the press.
And by the way, now that you're talking about attacks on freedom of the press, yes, as many of you know, as I think all of you know, this extraordinary thing has just happened in New York, where James O'Keefe, the president founder of Project Veritas, has, in the middle of the night, barged in all these FBI agents. Put him in handcuffs. They've taken away his electronic devices and started combing through his electronic and leaking it to the New York Times. This is an extraordinary thing that has happened. And by the way, there's the odd journalist, I think there's like one journalist from one of the mainstream medias who basically said, this is nothing that anyone should cheer.
Yeah.
But by the way, the silence from the mainstream media on this is beyond deafening.
It's beyond deafening. Some of them have said some things, right? But what I really gets my goat is I am not a fan of James O'Keefe's style of journalism. If you
I don't care. I don't care about what he's.
You are a liar. You are a liar. You quote undercover journalism all the time. When those people go into meat factories and show animals being mistreated,
yes,
you use that.
Yes.
Right. When they expose doctors selling opioids with undercover cameras.
It's as old as the hills. They've been at it for decades. For decades they've been doing this undercover stuff.
And also this idea that it may be stolen material. Look, all the great journalistic scoops have used material taken by people who didn't own it and given it to other people who didn't own it.
Correct.
For everything from WikiLeaks to the Panama Papers, the Fonseca Papers, all these things about people with offshore accounts. These are all papers stolen from lawyers' offices, taken by people who shouldn't have taken them and given to other journalists who shouldn't have them.
But it's also very important to recognise that James O'Keefe, who did come into possession of whatever this
Ashley Biden's,
whatever
it is no the FBI.
But by the way, he also went to the authorities. But also because, just as a really good journalist, when he couldn't confirm that this was actually the diary, he didn't.
We need to explain to
proceed.
people. We need to explain to people the background of the story. James O'Keefe had Ashley Biden's diary given to him by a source. And they went to extraordinary lengths to verify it, to try and prove that it was her diary. And this diary says embarrassing things, by the way, about the president and about her family. And more than embarrassing, almost very damaging things.
Yes.
James, to his credit, and funny, I don't know the full background. I think he was being overly cautious.
Yeah.
He could not prove that it was Ashley Biden's diary. The people who gave it to him said she left it behind in a house that she used to rent. So James couldn't verify the diary and tried to hand it back to the lawyers, to Ashley Biden's lawyers. You know, he couldn't verify the diary, so he couldn't run the story. That's fair enough. But the idea that a journalist who had nothing to do with the theft of the diary, who was presented it by a source, should then face any kind of legal repercussions. And then, by the way, even I think what the FBI are implying is that someone within Project Veritas then gave it to a third party who then published it, another website who published it. They're either alleging that Project Veritas stole it originally, which that's nonsense. That never happened. There's no implication of that. There's no evidence of that. Project Veritas had it, didn't run with it, tried to give it back to her lawyers. They didn't want it. Then the allegation is that a copy of it was given. I think the allegation is someone within Project Veritas gave a copy of it to a third party who then published it. But again, there's nothing illegal in that. This is persecution of journalists by the Biden Justice Department, by the FBI, by those sterling FBI guys. My God, how far the FBI has fallen. The astonishing thing with the FBI is there's no whistleblower in the FBI willing to call the FBI out and reveal the crap that goes on behind closed doors.
Really awful.
Yeah.
So you asked, I know. So people asked about some dish from Bulgaria, and I got I asked the hotel chef would he just make the very famous 𝙎𝙤𝙤 salad. So I've got some video here. You can start watching this now. So it's Bulgaria's most famous dish, the national salad, and the reason it's the national salad is that the colours reflect the same colours as in the flag. So basically, it's made from tomato, cucumber, pepper, and what they call here 𝙤𝙤𝙤, which is a goat cheese which has been in a brine. And you'll see it coming out of the brine there. And basically, if you can see the chef there from the hotel, he's just chopping them all up. I would actually be inclined to chop those pieces up smaller than he does. But this is the typical look of this 𝙎𝙤𝙤 salad. And what they do with it is they then dress that with some sunflower oil and some vinegar. But the salad is completely covered in this cheese. Which is fine.
And everyone's breaking for lunch
Everyone's
on
breaking
the set.
on the set. So this is
that's why you may be hearing some noise behind us.
Exactly.
Because we just finished the scene that I'm not allowed to talk about on the Belgrade Golf Club.
But I have to say, I'd highly recommend the salad. It's really, really nice. And what I'm going to do next week, we'll be back in Los Angeles. I'll have another dish that I want to share with you, which I think is really nice. No, I don't have all the footage together, unfortunately, for the second one. So I'm going to have all the footage together for the second dish that I'm going to share with you. But this 𝙎𝙤𝙤 salad, I'd highly recommend. National dish, and you see it produced almost everywhere, and I would really recommend it. Really nice, very refreshing, and very kind of good for you. You know, cucumbers, peppers, tomato, and this very nice goat's cheese that's been brined. So listen, that's us for this week, which is week 4, the end of the Serbia shoot. Very excited. We'll be back in LA with the cats next week. Can't wait for that. And obviously next week is going to be Thanksgiving as well. So we will see you next week in advance of Thanksgiving.
Yes.
We can't believe it actually, but everything has been going great. We have this amazing cast and people are working their asses off, and we're so glad and so grateful to you for making this happen. It's your contributions that has made this all possible. All these people working here. And we're going to just quickly have a little look at some of the behind the scenes footage that we shot earlier today.
Action!
Have a look at just the amount of workers here. Look at the people making food, people putting cameras together, the electricity, the lighting. Look at the number of people you have here. This is what you made happen, and we are so grateful to you.
And you're going to tell it. We're going to
and
tell
by
the
the way,
truth.
you are going to be
the Hunter Biden story.
And you can still go and you can contribute. And by the way, as it's coming now to the end of the year, and with Thanksgiving next week, please do think of contributing, because we really do need your help to make this film, to finish this film, and to get this film out.
How would they contribute?
And all you got to do is go to mysonhunter.com, and drop some money there. Also, you could give money generally to the work that we do, which is unreportedstorysociety.com. unreportedstorysociety.com.
So yes, please go to the unreportedstorysociety.com.
And if you're putting together your taxes at the end of the year, you might want to think about us. We would really appreciate it.
Yes,
we are a tax deductible 501c3, and we cannot go on without your help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Cut!